I cannot be the only one in DC watching my discretionary spending right now, but you still want to go out and have a good time, right? So where in DC can you see world-class artists for free? The Library of Congress. They have presented live music in one of the city's most iconic spaces for more than 100 years. The library is seriously so gorgeous. I checked out their schedule, and there are some things on there that I am genuinely excited about checking out. On April 1st, we have opera singer Janae Bridges with the Catalyst Quartet. Let me tell you, I looked up a video of her singing, and sis has pipes. On May 15th, we have jazz great Christian McBride, who is a 9-time Grammy winner. And on June 4th, we have DC native, Howard alum, and rising jazz singer Ekep Nkwele. The Library of Congress has such a wide range of events, there is truly something for everyone. Tickets are available now at loc.gov/concerts. See a show that's sold out? Don't sweat it. The Library of Congress offers day of rush passes to all performances. So see what's coming up at loc.gov/concerts.
Hey, life can change in an instant. One minute everything feels normal, and the next someone else's mistake turns your world upside down. That's when you need a team you can count on. NACE Law Group has been standing up for DC families for decades, fighting for neighbors hurt by medical malpractice, wrongful deaths, and serious injuries. They don't just settle quickly or push papers. They dig in, fight hard, and make sure every client gets the justice they deserve. And here's something we love. They're a longtime supporter of CityCast because just like us, they care about this community and the people who call it home. So if you've been hurt or someone you care about has, pick up the phone. Call NACE Law Group. They'll stand with you, fight for your family, and make sure your rights are protected. Visit WashingtonDCInjuryLawyers.com. That's WashingtonDCInjuryLawyers.com. Today on CityCast DC, after 2020, there was a huge trend towards changing out schools named for Confederates and slave owners. But what happens when the general public wants to restore them? That's what's been happening in some Virginia counties that are just beyond the DC area. And the fight is creating some case law that could ultimately affect those of us who live here in a place where folks absolutely aren't trying to restore those kinds of names. Karina Elwood covered some of these legal battles when she was a reporter for the Washington Post. She is here to explain. Today is Monday, February 9th. I'm Michael Schaefer. Here's what DC's talking about. Hey, Karina, welcome back.
Hey, thank you so much for having me.
So you've been covering this lawsuit in Virginia that involves a school that has changed its name twice. It was Stonewall Jackson, then it was something else. Now it's Stonewall Jackson again. Why did they change back?
Yeah, so they changed the name back in 2024. This was a vote from the school board, and there was, sort of this debate about whether or not the name change in the first place was what the community wanted. And so there was this sort of back and forth, and there were these candidates who were really supportive of changing the name back to what it was originally. And so in 2024, they took this vote and they decided to change it back, which was met with immediate, opposition and legal challenges. And so that's sort of where this court case came from.
So let me back up. It had been for decades Stonewall Jackson High School, named after the Confederate general. And then a few years ago, the duly elected school board of this county changed the name. There was an election, the membership of that school board changed, and the newly elected school board changed it back.
Yes.
And this had been like a big issue in that election?
Yeah, my understanding is this was something that the school board had sort of some of these candidates had campaigned on. This was something that was important to them, or at least that something that was important to this race, because they had previously tried to change the name back, and that effort had failed. And so this was sort of a second chance at that, and it passed, and the school board voted for it.
So some people might look at this and say, all right, well, that's democracy, right? There's an elected school board. They made an issue of this. They won, and they get to call it whatever they want. And even if that name is appalling and treasonous to a lot of us, what is the basis of the lawsuit? Because obviously the people who are suing don't see it that way.
Right. So the lawsuit has a couple different claims, and one of them, a judge has already sided with the students. So let me back up just a little bit. The lawsuit was filed by the NAACP of Virginia on behalf of a group of students in the county, Black students who had basically argued that this was unfair to them. And there's sort of two pieces of their claim. One is a freedom of speech claim, which a First Amendment claim, essentially saying that a school district cannot compel you to carry a message that you don't want to carry, and that by going to a school that's called Stonewall Jackson High School, you now have to carry a message of something that you might not necessarily agree with by wearing, a Stonewall Jackson jersey or representing, the Stonewall Jackson generals in, in a science fair competition, or all of these different ways in which you have to now become a representative of something that you might not agree with. And a federal judge agreed with the students on that case. The other piece of the lawsuit, which is the sort of claim that went to trial last month, is that that it creates actually an unfair environment for students, for Black students, and students of color in the environment, because it's creating an unequal opportunity of education. And that's sort of their other claim of this idea that if you are someone who's a person of color, you're not getting the same experience in school because you have to go to this school with a name that has a historic connotation of racism.
That second one seems like a much less troubling argument, a much stronger argument to me, that having to just exist in a school with this name of somebody who's only famous because he fought in a war against the United States in the name of slavery, it effectively deprives them of their civil rights. The other one, I mean, there's a Liberty High School. What if you're against liberty? Are you being compelled to carry the message of liberty? That seems like a tougher one to sell. You've been sitting in the court. What is your sense of where the judge seems to be on this? Is it a jury or a judge? I don't even know.
So it is a judge. It was a bench trial. For the record, I was not in court. I wrote a preview for the trial, and so I've talked with the lawyers though about sort of what happened. And the First Amendment claim, actually, it was the judge already ruled on that, and they sided with the students. He essentially said that it violated their First Amendment by making them walking billboards, was the exact phrasing that he used for Jackson. And basically ruled that the school cannot compel students to carry a message. And what that opinion did was it really established, and this was something that the both sides of the issue sort of agreed on, is that the name had this historic connotation, not only in the history of Stonewall Jackson, but also in the fact that the school was named Stonewall Jackson during a point of massive resistance in which the state was, being integrated, and that there were efforts to resist school integration, and, by doing things like naming schools Stonewall Jackson High School, that was supposed to resist sort of this movement.
All right, so that's super interesting, because the defense of maintaining Confederate names is often this is heritage, this is facts of history, but people often point out that actually a lot of these names they don't date from like the Civil War, they date from the Civil Rights era, when they were kind of slapped on buildings as like giant middle fingers aimed at the Civil Rights Movement. What's the history of the school? Was it always called Stonewall Jackson? When was it founded?
The judge established that in his ruling. This was in September, so this this was a little bit earlier than when it went to trial, but established that in that 71-page opinion, he basically said that Jackson's name was one that represented, in his exact language, was racial exclusion, and that was something that was established going into trial when they sort of push the questions of these other claims. Part of the argument to remove the names when they made that decision in 2020 to remove the names from the schools was based on the school history that the high school opened in 1959, which was during the era of massive resistance, and the school was segregated until 1963. And so because it had that history, that was sort of sets a big piece of the legal argument in which that the judge writes that it's an undisputed fact that Stonewall Jackson historically conveyed a message advocating for the exclusion of Black students from public schools. Like, that was the history of this school, and that is a fact in this case.
And meaning that the message was that in 1959 they chose to put this guy's name on a school as part of a
statewide effort to resist integration.
Right.
Catch world-class arts in DC this spring for free. The Peabody Institute of the Johns Hopkins University presents the Peabody Performance Series, a full season of free concerts at the Johns Hopkins University Bloomberg Center, located at 555 Pennsylvania Avenue Northwest. The Peabody Performance Series brings the artistry and innovation of one of the nation's leading conservatories to the heart of DC, with concerts and programs spanning jazz, classical music, and dance. Take a midday break with the Peabody Graduate Jazz Ensemble on February 27th. On March 24th, experience the Dance Showcase featuring contemporary choreography by Peabody faculty and alumni. On April 10th, the first of the Slang Lecture Series examines spirituals as the cultural bedrock of the American sound, led by distinguished visiting faculty artist Darren Atwater. Hear the Baltimore Jazz Collective's original compositions, arrangements, and swinging improvisations on April 17th. On May 1st, pianist Stephen Spooner presents Aspects of Liszt. And on May 8th, the season concludes with a performance by the Peabody Jazz Ensemble. While all events are free, tickets are required for entry. Learn more and get your tickets at washingtondc.jhu.edu.
It is one of my absolute favorite things when I get to do an ad read for something that I was already looking forward to doing. Because ever since I saw Amy Sherald's absolutely breathtaking portrait that she painted of First Lady Michelle Obama, I have been obsessed with her work ever since. So I am so geeked to have the chance to see her exhibition. It's Amy Sherald, American Sublime at the Baltimore Museum of Art. This exhibition showcases 38 of her breathtaking paintings, created from 2007 to the present, from her early, rarely seen works to her iconic, larger-than-life portraits that I first fell in love with. Over 52,000 people have already experienced it, making it the Baltimore Museum of Art's biggest exhibition in more than 2 decades. It would be a great day trip activity from DC for a date night or just to get out of the city. Tickets are just $18 for adults, and pro tip, it is free on Thursday evenings from 5 to 9 p.m. Buy tickets and plan your visit at artbma.org, and I'll see you there.
So you've said that this is probably not going to get wrapped until March. What are the next important dates, either in the trial or going forward, that we should look for?
Yeah, so essentially that the case went to bench trial in last month, and they heard from, sort of both sides, in which the students' lawyers presented this case, of which, the ways in which that they were getting an unequal treatment in school. And, the school district attorneys, or the school board's attorneys, presented a case in which that they believed that this was the right decision, not necessarily like a morally right decision, but a decision that was done in a way that was along the correct lines of governance, and their right to do that as an elected school board. That case will keep moving forward, and I believe they're going to expect for the case to wrap up in March with a decision sometime around then. Final dates are as far as like how long it will take the judge to write an opinion, and all of that is sort of up in the air. But that's what I'll be following, coming back to this a little bit later this year.
All right, so this school, Stonewall Jackson, it's in Shenandoah County, which is not strictly in the DMV. It's about an hour away. But this issue of renaming things that had been named for Confederates, particularly during the massive resistance era, that is an issue in the DMV and a lot of schools in Northern Virginia. And then the broader issue of renaming things that had been named for people whose legacies communities don't like, has been an issue even in the district. Is there anything in this trial that can kind of preview what may happen to some of these other renamings in the future?
Yeah, I think what's interesting in sort of what's so interesting about this case is this idea that they made a decision and changed it, and then made a decision to change it back. And whether or not that's happening other places is a little bit hard to say. Everything that I have seen has said that this is like sort of the first of its kind in the country to do this change and then change back. And, based on the conversations that, me and another reporter I worked with on this story had when that change was first made, or that change back was first made, was that they felt like Shenandoah's sort of location and historic ties to the Confederacy were part of the driver for this. And so, like, I don't know if other places that like don't feel like they have the same tie to a history of a place would be
Right.
compelled to go as far to like change names back. I just don't know if there's, the drive to do that. But, that's not to say that it's not going to happen other places.
So that's
But
just to say Stonewall Jackson's war against the United States, like he did his fighting in the Shenandoah Valley, namesake of the county.
right. And so, like, it's a broader question. But what this case does set up to do is set some precedent, right? Like, so if those cases do come up, right, if there are further instances of this will now, sort of have some legal precedent set in a case in whichever way they sort of, they lean in saying that, like, a school board can do this or can't do this. And, I think that is sort of what the like sort of next steps groundwork laying is happening here, like any lawsuit, right? Like I cover a lot of lawsuits involving schools, so they sort of like set up, what can happen in other schools and other places.
So like Arlington took Robert E. Lee's name off of a school. Now, it's hard for me to imagine any elected body in Arlington working to put it back because that it seems like something that the locals would not vote for there. Is there any other place in the DMV where there's any sort of constituency that wants an old name back?
Not that I've heard of.
No Woodrow Wilson fans out there pushing in DC?
No, like at least not with schools that I've heard of, But I imagine that this debate extends beyond just schools, right? Like there's street names and there's, different types of buildings and all of these different sort of institutions that carry names of all kinds of different backgrounds, right? And I think that this is a conversation that's been going on for years, and I think it's one that's going to continue just because it is something that obviously people care about. And like making sure that people feel safe and secure in their environments like their school is something that people, want to make changes for. And you know what? There's also people who want to make changes, to preserve what they see is history that they don't want changes to happen, right? And so it is this sort of ripe area for debate that when it comes up, people feel very passionately about. And so I think that, I don't know that how many schools or how many places are, going to change and change back. But, it's I guess never off the table.
Before I let you go, I mean, I know that this is a thing you've been doing reporting on. What's it like? You're this, outsider from Washington. You come into a community and you're saying, like, you're asking about the school name. What have your conversations been like? What kind of welcome have you gotten?
Yeah, I think that these types of cases obviously catch like a lot of eyes. Like I am not the only person, coming in and reporting on this. This is, happening, like I said, first of its kind in the country. It's obviously very interesting. And there's some really interesting sort of like legal questions at the heart of this. And so, I think that the people who are at the sort of heart of this were prepared for that. And so, they were really interested, especially the students and their lawyers have been, really helpful in helping like sort of understand what's happening. Because I admittedly like did not, I'm not there for everything. I'm not there for every school board meeting like a lot of local news outlets are. And I think that, obviously covering or following your local news, if it's an issue affecting your community, is a really important way to like stay up to date with everything that's happening. And then, if you're somewhere else and you just need to know what's happening in Shenandoah County for some reason, then, we've got good coverage of that too.
Do you have a sense of where the student body is? I mean, like the kids who are suing, these are their classmates. Do we know whether the average student or their classmates have been supportive or disagree with them or what?
Some of the students testified, in court, and, they talked about their experiences and what that was like. And so, yeah, I don't know about how supportive other students have been, though.
And the last question. The Trump administration nationally has been very critical of renamings and of removal of Confederate things. Is there anything that the federal government can do, will do, might do around this issue?
I don't know, but I will say that, the federal government has been very interested in Virginia schools. I've written a ton about that, about their influence and, in the ways that they've gotten involved with, Northern Virginia school policies. So I don't know, but I do know they are interested in Virginia.
Karina, thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thank you.
Before we go, we've had an amazing influx of new paying neighbors over the past week. If you missed it, last week we announced that CityCast DC is growing. We're immediately hiring 4 journalists to break stories and own key beats. We're hoping to do our part to try to fill the void in DC's media landscape following the cratering of the Washington Post. If you want to become a member like the people we're about to name, head to membership.citycast.fm. It's $10 a month or $100 for the year. So here goes. Thank you to Meg D, Alyssa K, John T, Eric B, Jonathan P, Kelly E, JD N, Majlis W, Joe S, Julia G, Ann T, Jennifer P, Bethany G, Max F, Tyler S, Vanessa C, Chris M, Aliza C, William M, Alex C, Rebecca M, and Julia L. You guys, thank you so much. And that is all for today here on CityCast DC. If you enjoyed the show, why not tell a friend, rate the show, leave us a review, and for goodness sakes, subscribe to our morning newsletter. We'll be back tomorrow morning with more news from around the city. Bye.